Okay, you're going to practice this practice problem for direct labor. So Hansen Inc. has the following direct labor standard to manufacture one zippy, 1.5 standard hours per zippy. What is that?
Standard price.
Close.
Or standard quantity.
Standard quantity, right? So 1.5 hours per unit at $12 per direct labor hour.
Standard price.
Yep, standard price. So $12 per hour. Last week, 1,550 direct labor hours were worked.
Actual quantity.
Actual quantity. At a total labor cost of 18,910. So
Actual price.
Actual price times actual quantity. So that's the total amount that we actually incurred for direct labor hours incurred. So we need to calculate the actual price per hour by taking 18,910.
Hi, did you go number 2?
McKenna, is your dog back?
Oh my gosh, that's so awkward. Yeah. You know, when they get all excited, they want a treat. They're like, "Here, good boy, you get one." Awkward.
No worries. But we're going to divide it by
Actual quantity.
actual quantity, 1,550 hours. So your actual price is going to be an amount per hour, right? Something you can always double check to make sure. Direct labor, actual price per hour is what?
$12.20.
$12.20, correct. So there was no rounding. It rounded perfectly to that. Actual output is the number of units produced, which was 1,000.
1,000.
Yep. So we plug all of this information in. Obviously, the actual is going to recompute correctly. But we want it just so we have the actual price paid per hour. $12.20 per hour. So you calculated an actual price paid for direct labor of 18,910. Under part 2, we have our actual quantity of 1,550 hours again. At the standard price, how much we should have paid for those hours of direct labor. $12. So how much total should we have paid for those 1,550 hours that we incurred?
18,600.
Yeah.
Yep, 18,600, correct. So with the direct labor rate variance, we're comparing what we actually paid for labor versus what we should have paid for labor based on the hours that we actually completed, 1,550. We're isolating the price. We actually paid $12.20 per hour. We should have only paid $12 per hour. Are we going to have a favorable or unfavorable rate variance for direct labor?
Unfavorable.
Correct. It's going to be unfavorable. We paid too much per hour. By how much?
$310.
Correct. 310. Unfavorable. Any questions on those first two calculations, or do you feel pretty confident in them?
Pretty confident.
Perfect. For my standard over here for column 3, this is how much we should have paid in total for direct labor based on the actual output, how many units we actually produced. So we're going to take our standard quantity allowed. So standard quantity per unit, which is 1.5 hours per unit. We're going to multiply that times what to get our standard quantity allowed?
1,000.
1,000 units produced. And then how much we should have paid per hour, which is $12 per hour standard. We should have incurred 1,500 hours of labor to produce those 1,000 units. Should have paid $12 per hour. So in total, we should have only spent how much for direct labor?
18,000.
Correct. With the standard, I'm sorry, for the direct labor efficiency variance, we're comparing how many hours we should have used to how many hours we actually used, the quantity. So we should have used 1,500 hours. We actually used 1,550 hours. So did we use more or less hours than we should have?
More.
More. So we're going to have an unfavorable efficiency variance by how much?
$600.
600. Overall, for direct labor, the flexible budget variance is the total variance between what we should have paid to create those 1,000 units versus what we actually paid to create those 1,000 units. 18,910 is what we actually paid versus what we should have paid 18,000. 910 unfavorable. If you look at the two variances that you calculated above, both of them were unfavorable. You could have just added those up and gotten the same number too. Overall, this is an easier problem just because the information is given to you it's basically lobbed up to you. But you have to do the easier problems before you can get into the harder ones. The process is the same. If you go through, you set it up initially, you'll be fine. Questions here before we jump into variable overhead?
On the exam, are we gonna have, because on the homework, when you do the problems, it asks you for like to write out the formula and then to put the formula in.
Okay.
But the way they want the formula is different than like
AQ AP minus SP. For your direct labor rate, it's the actual quantity that you're multiplying times actual price minus the standard price.
Okay. Are we gonna have something similar on the exam where we like write out the entire formula, or are we just gonna go straight into doing it?
They're gonna make you do the formulas online. I can't change how they make you put it into the system.
Okay.
But if you do it this way, then you can double check what you're using. And you'll
Okay,
know
cool.
exactly what to use in the calculations. Over here, you're holding steady the standard price and its actual quantity minus the standard quantity allowed. So it's the same thing. It's just I don't use the formulas because you will jump to the wrong answer usually because you'll use the wrong numbers.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go back to variable overhead. If it comes up, there we go. So variable overhead, you're calculating exactly the same. You're probably going to be sick of it after this one. Glacier Peak Outfitters has the following variable manufacturing overhead standard for its mountain parka. 1.2 standard hours per parka. is our standard quantity. So 1.2 hours per unit. And if we look above to direct labor, standard quantity is the same for both because variable overhead is applied to units based on direct labor hours. So the standard quantity would be the same. So 1.2 standard hours per parka at $4 per hour. So our standard price is $4 per hour. So that's our variable overhead rate that we would have calculated. Last month, employees actually worked 2,500 hours, which is our actual quantity to make 2,000 parkas. Units produced, so actual output. Actual variable manufacturing overhead for the month was $10,500. So 10,500. It's the total amount of overhead costs or variable overhead costs that was incurred. We're going to divide that by the actual quantity, which was 2,500 hours, to get the actual price that was paid per hour. So
$4.20.
420. That sounds about right. We'll plug all of this information back in here. So the actual quantity was 2,500 hours at the actual price of $4.20 per hour. So we incurred a total of $10,500 for direct or for variable overhead. Actual quantity is carried over to number 2, 2,500 hours. At the standard price, what we should have paid for those hours, which was $4 per hour. So for the 2,500 hours that we actually incurred, we should have only paid how much?
$10,000.
10,000. So we actually paid $4.20 per hour versus what we should have paid $4 per hour. So we incurred more than we should have per hour, right? We're going to have an unfavorable variable overhead rate variance. $500. That last column is how much we should have paid in variable overhead when we produce 2,000 units. So 1.2 hours per unit is our standard quantity times 2,000 units produced at the standard price of $4 per hour. So we should have incurred 2,400 hours to produce 2,000 units, and we should have paid $4 per hour. In total, how much should variable overhead have been to produce 2,000 units? What was that?
9,600.
Correct. 9,600. So here we're isolating the hours, right? We should have incurred 2,400 hours. We actually incurred 2,500 hours. So we're going to have an unfavorable efficiency variance. We used more hours than we should have. And the variance is $400 unfavorable. Overall, our flexible budget variance, we should have spent 9,600. We actually spent 10,500 on variable overhead during the period. It's going to be an unfavorable variance. 9,600 versus 10,500, $900. Questions? By the time I get to variable overhead, you guys are usually bored with it, because this part it seems redundant. So this is usually when I throw in a harder problem for you. I'm not going to have you practice a variable overhead variance yet. I'm going to have you do, let's see, go back in here. Different practice problem. Mm-hmm. Do you want to do the direct materials, direct labor one that's kind of combined?
Sure. Let's give it a try.
Okay. Let's practice this one. Okay, so they prepare in-flight meals, right? During the most recent week, the company prepared 7,000 of these meals using 2,700 direct labor hours. So the 7,000 meals is what?
The actual output.
Yeah, the actual output. So I'm just going to label it over here. So output. And 2,700 direct labor hours is your
Actual quantity.
actual quantities. So I'm just going to put that in here. So 2,700 hours, because we're going to use it under 1 and 2. During the most recent week, the company prepared 7,000 of these meals using 2,700. Sorry, the company paid these direct labor workers a total of $27,000 for this work, or $10 per hour. So they gave us what?
The actual price.
Actual price. So they paid $10 per hour. So when I calculate actual quantity times the actual price, it recomputes to the 27,000 they gave us, correct?
Yes.
According to the standard cost card for this meal, it should require 0.4 direct labor hours, which is our
Standard cost.
Standard quantity.
Quantity. Sorry.
It's okay, it's SQ. At a cost of $9.30 per hour. Standard price. So we have enough information to calculate the rest of it. Standard quantity is 0.4 direct labor hours per unit times the number of units they produce, which is actual output of 7,000 meals. At the standard price of $9.30 per hour. So we'll plug in the $9.30 per hour to 2 and 3. For 2, how much should we have paid for those 2,700 hours that we actually incurred?
25,110.
25,110. Oops. For the standard quantity times the standard price, what we should have paid to produce those 7,000 units. First, you calculate the number of hours that you needed. 2,800 hours should have been used, and you should have paid $9.30 per hour. So to produce those 7,000 meals, how much should we have paid for labor?
$26,040.
26,040. So when we're calculating our direct labor rate variance, we should have spent $9.30 per hour. We actually spent $10 per hour in labor. So we have an unfavorable or favorable rate variance.
Unfavorable.
Unfavorable by quite a significant amount, 1,890. We spent more on labor than we should have. For the efficiency variance, let's see how well we spent or used those hours rather. So our efficiency variance, we should have used 2,800 hours. We actually used 2,700 hours. So we're going to have a favorable efficiency variance. We used less hours than we should have. And it's 930 favorable. In total, our variance is favorable or unfavorable. We should have spent 26,040. We actually spent 27,000 for labor.
Unfavorable.
Unfavorable by how much?
960.
960. Correct. Question on that one. So it wasn't given to you as pretty, but you still figured out the information where it went, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's take a break here.